I had to travel 60 miles to get here. And back in those days, I didn't even have a trailer. I towed it flat behind my car.
I think in 52 or 53, a bunch of us from up Red Hook Berry trip, Elmer trip, we conned our way into being brought down here to the races, and from that point on it was pretty much the major interest in my life.
I live across the river. I live on the west side of the river. Ruby's a little town outside of Kingston. But we used to come over on the ferry, but by the time the races ended, we had to either go to Poughkeepsie and come across the Poughkeepsie Bridge, Mid-Hudson Bridge, or we had to go to Catskill over Ripley and Winkle to go over because the ferry stopped running. So it was a long night.
I lived on Parsonage Street, which was walking distance to the Speedway. So there was no towing my car. I started up at the house and drive it to the track.
This speedway was a little different than all the rest of the speedways that I've been on.
Rhinebeck was a very tight fifth of a mile speedway, and you were on and off the gas and on the wheel all the time.
It was just fun. It was a good night out.
It was, a night of fun, competition. Some nights some days you ate the bear and some days the bear ate you.
We would pull in, unhook. We were flat towing at that time, no trailers. And the tow car would have to be put back outside because of the limited space. Then you'd go to work and change your tires and gas the car, and the driver would take it out for a warm-up and come back. Well, it's doing this, what do we got to do about it? And we would make a change, and he'd go back out. It may be better, it may be worse.
You come in, you got in the pits, you got the car ready, you got it set up. And they gave us a couple laps out there to warm up the car. Got back into the pits again, and you got ready to go racing again.
You was busy. You had preparations to get the car ready to go out, and you'd go out and warm up, and you'd run your heats and qualify for the feature. And the only time you really had any lull time, they used to run 3 heats, as I recall, and the heat that you weren't in, you had a chance to walk down to the edge of the pits and watch the track, watch the competition run in their heats. But other than that, why, when you weren't on the track, you were mussing with your car.
It was all day in anticipation and preparation, drag it down here, and I get here about 2 hours early. Of course, we were all raring to go. So I was there early, and it was, a night of fun, competition. Some days you ate the bear and some days the bear ate you.
This speedway was a little different than all the rest of the speedways that I've been on. And I got pretty used to it.
Well, on a Saturday night, there was a lot of noise. It was a macadam track, so there wasn't a lot of dust. Flat track. It was originally built for midgets, not for stock car.
It was kind of a challenging little track because you didn't have much straightaway. You had fairly broad turns, and you could keep up a good average speed onto it, even though it was flat and a little bit hard to drive.
The track set out away from the grandstands, so which made it a very nice track to spectate from for the spectators' views. And it was smooth, but it was flat, and you had to have a very good car that handled well on the outside in order to go from the back to the front every week like I had. And it was very good, very, very competitive. We had people from Connecticut, Massachusetts, and as well as the local people. So it was competitive.
I wasn't used to the track, but I got used to driving on it. I only ran here like 3 or 4 times, and I did pretty good all the time.
You had basically 2 lanes that you could handle, inside and outside. You didn't have a 3-lane track at all.
For me, it was real confusing because it was crowded, the pits were full. I had a heck of a time finding a racetrack the first time, riding around in the pits trying to figure out where I was supposed to go. And then once I got on the track, it was good that I met Hansen because he kind of helped me out a little bit, showed me where, you know, what things were about. I'd never been on a racetrack before, and his help made that happen.
And it was flat in the first and second turn, and it was a little bit of bank in the third and fourth turn. It was tricky, and it had to be a handling track. Horsepower didn't make as much difference as handling and maneuverability. It was a real challenge of a place to race because it was slick and it was tight quarters. However, it was a great education to race in tight traffic. Like for example, the sedans, when they first started them, they started with 3 of them out there that night, and one of them wouldn't run, so it ran the first race with 2 cars. Well, it was so popular that the following weekend there was 50 cars out there, and when you get 50 cars on a 5th-mile track, it's some real close maneuvering, and it was a real education. And even when it got down to where it was a 24 car field of the Premier Series, the non-Fords, it was still good traffic. So you were in tight traffic all of the time, and it was a good education and drill for racing on the faster, bigger tracks because traffic wasn't intimidating. You learned how to run in close quarters. And Rhinebeck, you had to run in close quarters, and you brought that skill along to other tracks.
Very quick. I mean, it was a short track, a lot of cars, a lot of traffic. It wasn't really high speeds, but it was intricate. There was a lot of handling, a lot of inside, outside. It was difficult. It was a tough little track, tough place to race. You didn't have a lot of time to think about everything. It was so short.
This was an asphalt track that you had to work hard in the car to get around. It took a lot of maneuvering, a lot of steering wheel, let's put it that way.
Tight. From what I was used to, it was very tight. We're used to slipping and sliding, and Rhinebeck was a very tight 1/5-mile speedway, and you were on and off the gas and on the wheel all the time.
It was very competitive, especially if you started in the back of the pack. You know, and I forget how many. You started at least 25 cars on that little short track. You started in the back, you had your work to do to get to the front, if you could.
It was very exciting to see all the people come in. They always had a full grandstand. I knew a lot of the drivers that were driving back then. They kind of took me under their wing because I was the little guy, and they were all kind of like my heroes, and they really put on a great show.
Very often there was a Saturday night when it was maybe a half a dozen seats left in the place, and a good crowd that cheered you on.
The atmosphere, the people were really great. I think they loved to come out. There wasn't that much to do on Saturday nights back in the early 50s. So Rhinebeck Speedway was we had a good crowd. We had good drivers. We had good people. The fans were great. So it was a good experience for me. I liked that.
The time I raced here, there was a lot of people. It was very popular here, and it was a big Saturday night. It was a big night to come over here to Rhinebeck and go to stock car races. Way back, even when I was a kid.
Every Saturday night, we wound up at Rhinebeck Racetrack. My mom worked, my sisters worked, so we basically worked at the racetrack. We were under the grandstand working, and we set up our novelty stand and we sold our photographs and all the trinkets that we used to sell, little stock cars and little checkered flags and stuff like that. So that's what we did.
They had their concession stand underneath the bleachers. So a friend of mine, he and I would go there on a Sunday, sneak in the concession stand and eat the ice cream that we desired and candy. I guess we shouldn't have been doing that, but that's what we did. But I guess Mother Nature got even with me, because one time I'm climbing around on the grandstands and I interrupted a beehive, and I went home in a hurry that day.
My dad had a gas station up in Red Hook, right next to the post office. And somehow we found out that they were going to have these jalopy sedan races back in 1958. So we found an old car, an old 39 Hudson sedan, and we put the necessary roll bar and seat belt and cut the fenders off it and gutted it. And we came down here to the racetrack with it, and we did exceptionally well with it.
In 1950, maybe 51, is when I ran here. United Stock Car Racing Club was at the time, and I drove Sharkey's number 44 here, and I won a couple times.
For me, it was very exciting. Here I am, a kid, competing against some very good drivers and doing well. I enjoyed it. And being that I was a local person, a local kid, and taking some checkered flags, that even made it more exciting. You know, everybody knew me. I get back to school, boy, oh boy, I'm a hero.
Well, the first time I ever went out there, I think it was in '56 in the car that I had my brother-in-law, and I was working on it all week, and I think I was 16 or 17. And I always wanted to take it out and warm it up. So I took it out in the warm-ups one night, the first night I went out, and I went around, and the first few laps it seemed like the fence was about 10 feet tall, and it was actually only about 2 feet tall. But as I went around, I got going a little around a little harder and harder and harder and harder, and it came down to the normal height of 2 feet instead of the 10 feet. It seemed like it was very intimidating to start with. And the most memorable thing is when I got on it, I got in it too hard, and I totally spun it out and threw grass all over the infield, and came out just laughing like hell. That was the initiation. and they were promoter Ed and Ryan, and the people standing around all really persecuted my poor brother-in-law. Said, "You ought to have the kid drive the car." He sticks his foot in it. And there was no brains involved at all, but yes, I did stick my foot in it.
That first night, my mother had to sign a release so I could get in the pits. And I didn't know it, but my brother brought her to the races. She didn't know I was going to drive. And that was a surprise for everybody. She wasn't too happy with that.
My first car was one I borrowed from Elmer Hogan's junkyard up in Red Hook, and it was on loan. It was a 37 Buick, and it was a real big car. Actually, it was a real classic car before I tore it all apart. He loaned it to me on the agreement that at the end of the year, his only interest was what it weighed and what it was worth in junk. So I brought it back to him at the end of the year, returned it to him at the end of the year, and it was junk. It was everything he expected, and it was sold for iron, probably cut up and sold for iron. But during the summer, I had to keep it there because my parents didn't know anything about that I was racing. And I think I got away most of the first year without them knowing it. What happened is about the third or fourth night when I was running that flatback Ford, and I'd won the first 3 nights out. And then there was a little pile up in front of the starter stand. And Emil Meltz from Hudson was running a Hudson then, and he stalled out at the home stretch. And I had started in the rear, and I came up between a pile of cars. And for some reason, his car wasn't running anymore, and right in front of the starter stand, it stopped. And 2 cars separated, and there was me. And I hit him, I rear-ended him, and we laughed today with about his stiff neck and my busted knee. So anyway, I wound up going to get a little few stitches that night, and I guess it came out in the paper over the next couple of days there, and the rumor was that I had gotten hurt because I was limping around my place of employment at the time. And it was because I had some stitches in the knee. And anyway, from that point on, before that they wouldn't sign to let me race, but when they found out that if they signed, it would pay my doctor bills, then they signed for me, and then it was all out in the open.
It's only right that we should say something from our main supplier, Elmer Hogan Jump Yard, 199, going out of Red Hook and he was down in there on the old road now that goes off to the left there, and we got so much stuff down there. When he walked in, he knew just about what we wanted.
It was fortunate that there wasn't a lot of people injured because our guardrail around the track was probably 2 feet high. And it was wood, oak.
The only thing about Rhinebeck was it had board fences, which most of the tracks back there did. And if you got your wheels on a board fence, you got airborne or over the fence. And in many cases, if you got over the fence and the backstretch, you'd knock all the billboards down. And there was a plus and minus of that. The minus was you tore your car up, but the plus was when you drove out through the billboards and back into the pits, you got a big applause. So that was sort of the rites of passage to clean out the billboards.
I guess I thought I could win it on the first lap, I guess. And I went in the first turn flat out, never took my foot out of it. And when I exited the second turn, I went airborne over the fence and into the billboards and I don't remember what sign it was, but I took it out. It was down on the ground. Wood flying all over, and I didn't win that race.
It was a main event thing, and I was running about 3rd spot, and I could see some room for the radiator cap. So I think, well, if the radiator cap will fit through that opening, the rest of it will follow. That didn't work out too well. I got flipping. I went over and over and over, and went over the guardrails, through the billboards. Back then they had wooden billboards, and I had a car full of lumber, and it landed on its wheels. And the track being in the middle of the horse track, I got on the horse track, followed it around, and got back at the pit gate, and they're over with the ambulance and everything looking, where is he? You know, they were all all excited and worried about me, but I was just waiting to come back on the track.
Well, I was excited because I'd never raced her before. And believe it or not, I was half a lap ahead in a feature that night. And a fella come out of the infield and put me up over the fence. So I didn't have a very good start here.
We had, at that time, the sedan class, which was my early class car. After the Sportsman Modified feature, the sedans would go out for just one race, everybody all together. There was probably maybe a field of at that time 16, 18 cars maybe. And the first time I went out, and I lined up, about mid-pack, I guess. And about 3 or 4 laps in, and somebody got tangled up coming off the 4th turn, and it ended up getting up in the air. And I remembered looking up through my windshield and seeing the rear end of that car as I was going by. And I said, "You better stay up there for a minute." And when I got out of that, I said, I don't know whether I want to do this or not. But I decided I did.
And even at one time, we had our own stock car, and that did not work out too well. We destroyed it right here at Rhinebeck Racetrack. Well, we had a driver by the name of Jerry Townley who drove the car for my dad, and I guess he was just learning, and he learned on our car. But it was an experience. But here again, we'd take it to the racetrack, and then the following week we'd be working on it to get it back ready for the next weekend. It was an ongoing thing.
My dad that year was hit by a stock car, came over the retaining wall and went into the pits. And when I went to the hospital to visit with him, he looked up at me not knowing whether he was going to survive or not. "Now look what you've done to me." Well, that kind of put the stop to my racing career. I decided then it wasn't worth killing a family member, which it practically happened. I didn't do this personally, but it sure did set me back and kind of put the kibosh on racing any further.
They had a 250 lapper at Rhinebeck, and I was lucky enough to stick around to the end of it, and I ended up winning it. And didn't pay an awful lot, but it was 250 laps of learning experiences, and it was very good.
We won our very first race ever here at Rhinebeck, and we won our, I don't say our fair share, but we won a few over the years in both the modified and the new car. And of course, it was a little tiny bull ring when most people are starting to expand and go to the bigger tracks and so forth. We just loved it here in Rhinebeck.
In '59, getting the championship, it was quite an achievement, I thought. And I also, in '59, I didn't run the last 4 weeks. And I was so far ahead in points that I still got the championship. I was way out there in points. I had fun. And my dad, unbeknown to me, had purchased the next class, a better class of race car for the coming year. But of course that fell through after the accident, after he almost becoming killed.
After the races, everybody used to come down out of the grandstands and hang around the cars. It was just fun. It was a good night out. A lot of kids used to come. I used to set the kids in the car, little kids. And, we never got to ride around with them. It was my car anyway, but it was good.
Come down and mingle with the drivers and the owners and talk, and some people would even have beer, but of course I was too young, so you can read between the lines.
And then as far as after the races, there was the beer booth. We usually went over and had a few after the races, and that was, talked about the good, bad, and the ugly. And of course, It was all dependent on how you felt about it was how you did that night. So anyway, I had good nights, had bad nights.
We had a nice bunch of fellas, and my car handled very good on the outside, and when you could race alongside of these guys on the outside at this track, as small as it was, I respect them for giving me room and not putting me over the wall. It would have been very easily. The fence was, I think, 2 2x6s, so it wasn't very high, and he got over it very easily. But I respect the fellas for giving me room and letting me race.
Racing has been very good to me over the years. I started out racing here in Rhinebeck.
Just enjoyed coming up here to race. Win, lose, or draw, just love being here.
Every Saturday night that I was there, it was just the excitement, and it was exciting. It was an exciting little track, and I just loved being there.
It was tough. It was a tough track to win on because so tight. You had to work at it, and had to have the car, get the car to handle real good. That was another thing, and it was just great.
You know, best time we ever had was go to Rhinebeck Speedway. You know, and knuckle busting and just beating it to see if you can get it up there in the race and get into victory lane. And you know, times were better then.
It was fantastic, and I was very sad to see it dissolve. It was an attraction. It was quite a Saturday night attraction.
From 1922 to 1962, the Rhinebeck Speedway was a popular source of entertainment for area residents. In the 1920s, it was high-powered, open-wheeled cars known as big cars that roared to life. Midget cars ruled the 1940s, followed by sportsman and modified stock cars in the 1950s. The Rhinebeck Speedway was the place to be on any given Saturday night. Unfortunately, in 1962, the Speedway was shut down permanently. It is speculated that a change in local culture combined with the expanding residential area of Rhinebeck all contributed to its demise. The track remains alive and well in the memories and photographs of the people who raced, worked, and enjoyed their time at the Rhinebeck Speedway. The horse track that surrounded it still exists at the Dutchess County Fairgrounds in upstate New York.
All of the best associations and friends that I have, many of them were here today. And despite our dust-ups and our adversities, we all remain friends today by the same standard. And that's pretty great.
Being here today, seeing some of the old timers that I raced against, and some of the guys that I know that didn't race against but were part of the crews, it's a good feeling to see them. We're all getting old, and we all got some problems, but it's good to see everybody.
I certainly am glad that we've had this gathering of old timers and let us chit chat and brag about what we did and didn't do. It's a nice thing. It's great. A little bit of history saved. And I think history is important.